much. So I'm going to give you some quick ground rules before we start. And we've got a little bit beyond time. So we are going to go a little bit over time on that side as well. So it'll be about 8:33 when we stop. Is that okay for everybody?
Sounds great with me.
Perfect. Thank you. So the first is our introduction. So we will give everyone a chance of 2 minutes to introduce yourself, your name, your background, and what your mandate is for the ward that you're going to be elected in. And thereafter, every question will have maximum 2 minutes. 1 to 2 minutes is what I'm hoping to spend on each question. And please just answer the question, because most of the time our overzealous candidates want to share so much more than what I ask you. So just stick to the question. Thank you so much. And that'll help everybody else get equal opportunity to answer questions. So let me start with Harun Ali, the youngest person in the world. Wow. I'm so impressed by you, Harun. Can
Hi.
you Hi. Can you share your introduction and why you decided to get on council at such a young age?
Yeah. First off, I want to recognize that we are situated on Treaty 6 territory. And I also want to take the time to thank the Ladies Corner and you for organizing this fantastic community event. I think it's so important for us to make sure that communities are able to get out and know the candidates. My name is Haruna J.Ali. I am running as the youngest and only BIPOC candidate in Ward Papastew so far. I am a community organizer, student, and activist who grew up in Edmonton's Southside. And for the past few years, I've been working as an advocate for BIPOC issues and youth issues, and as well as I also advocated against the youth minimum wage. I'm running for city council because I'm passionate about affecting change in our lives of our unhoused people, people struggling with addiction, low-income people, and other vulnerable communities. And after speaking to countless people on my campaign and on previous political campaigns, I know that these are the same issues that people in my ward are concerned about. I've seen many friends choose to leave Edmonton because they don't see a future here. And I want to work on city council to help create a city that works for everyone, because that's what's so important here. I think Edmonton has the potential to become a place where everyone, regardless of circumstance, can build a life. But to become that place, we need a city council that is truly representative of our diversity. The theme of my platform is the future for all. It includes 6 areas of policy: justice, transit, housing, economic recovery, community development, and sustainability. And I'm sure that during this forum, I'll have the opportunity to discuss so much more about this. But yeah, I'm excited about the future of Edmonton. And I hope after this fall, I'll be able to contribute that on City Council.
Wow, Harun, thank you so much. Susan, you're our next candidate.
There's many reasons why I want to run. I have a long history in Papastew. My family has been in the ward for close to 85 years. I was born and raised in the ward, did spend 7 years in other municipalities. My dad was raised in Ritchie. My grandparents had a home in Park Allen for 53 years. My sister lives in Greenfield. I moved, my parents had us in Empire Park for the first 5 years of my life. Then we moved to Aspen, and I returned to Aspen and raised my family here. In Aspen, I developed the largest community connection and crime prevention program that Edmonton has, which I believe can be rolled out throughout the EFCL to increase engagement and inclusivity and crime prevention at virtually no cost. However, I'm running because I feel the city has veered off course drastically, and I want to focus on our core municipal responsibilities. We are leaving so many people and businesses behind. And with my significant business background in capital projects, project management, program management, process management, I think that I would be a great asset to the city with that business experience. Now, taxes have gone, the tax burden is high on the citizens. And when we look at what's been asked of us by the city auditor, I don't think it's impossible to get back on track, but I have those skills to get us back on track. So business and community heart are not mutually exclusive. They are completely related, and I want to make sure that we have both to get our city back up and running after this very catastrophic 18 months.
Thanks so much, Susan. Great, great for our time. Byron, let's hear from you.
Hi. Yeah, well, I'll reiterate what Harun said. Thank you for putting this on, and thanks for doing the land acknowledgement, Harun. Saved me a little bit of time on my introduction here, I guess, but I think it's important that we do that. So thank you so much. So I was actually raised in St. Albert by a single mom. I'm the youngest of three boys. That's kind of a fact that I appreciate more and more as I get older. Since high school, I've been in Edmonton, and I think if I do the math right now, that makes me officially an Edmontonian longer than a resident of St. Albert. Also makes me feel old. I've lived all over the city. I now call Richie my home, where I live with my partner and our young son. I went to the University of Alberta. I got my degree in economics. And since then, I've been working in the environmental sector. I manage an audit team in the environmental sector, and that's actually helped me kind of prepare for this position, because I've had to work across the provinces, work with a lot of the organizations throughout all of Canada, and even spent some time up in Yellowknife working on their program up there. While at university, I've been on multiple boards, one of which I saw me go over to Tanzania for a summer in rural Tanzania. I've got the retail experience as well, and I've even done road construction while working through university. So that's shown me kind of the feet on the ground, how you build a city from that level up. But I've always been passionate about politics, specifically at the local level. I don't really have any interest in party politics. The divisiveness entrenched in the whole system kind of turns me off. So this is kind of the highest level I think I would ever want to be involved in. And what really got me to decide to run was a mixture of my passion for politics, but also a growing sense of urgency that we need to do something about the climate emergency. I got a son. I want him to have a planet he can live in. And like everyone else here, I imagine we all love the city of Edmonton. I love the city of Edmonton. I love what it is. I love what it can become. And I think that there's so much potential to build a city that really works. And I truly believe we need leaders that want to help the city. Our communities can work across party lines and, approach challenges with sustainable ideas and encourage people to accept the change instead of force the change on them. So we can really make some impactful, meaningful change.
Thank you so much, Byron. Kirsten, you're next.
Hi, everyone. Yes, and thanks for having us, and thanks for the land acknowledgements as well, Harun. My name is Kirsten Goa, and I live in Old Strathcona, which is the neighborhood I grew up in. Where I'm raising my family. So I have 5 children. My oldest is 21, and then I have 2 sets of twins. So I'm used to hard work and no sleep and not really satisfying anyone most of the time. But the, I was never going to run for office. And 1995, I vowed I would never run for office. And it really was about sort of seeing the need for a different kind of leadership. That over many, many years led to me deciding that I would run last election. And that has only become more urgent. So we're going through massive change. We're going from being a, big, small city to a small, big city. And it's like we're teenagers and all of our parts are growing at different speeds and in different ways. And it's awkward and hard. And then we have a pandemic and major economic change and a climate crisis. We have, 200 more people every month who are living rough as our neighbors without a roof over their heads. Everyone's feeling it. There's, so much anxiety and stress, and we really run the risk of digging in our heels and trying to revert to what the status quo, except for that the status quo isn't going to work anymore. So we have a large, big changes happening in our land use policy And I started really my municipal activism and organizing some of it I did about almost 20 years ago, but really in earnest about 12 years ago with the last municipal development plan and trying to save agricultural land up in the Northeast. And really realizing that we needed to change how we grew as a city. And in the meantime, I knew we needed to get more dense, but I also saw my own community often opposing any kind of density and most projects that were coming to council. And I'm like, and I understood why, because they often weren't great. But that led to me saying we have to figure out how to do this differently. And so I've ended up doing work in community on, everything from local food, land use. I co-chaired the City Council Initiative on Public Engagement for 2 years, as well as the Guiding Coalition on Engagement. I've been on my community league board. I've been on the board of a national charity. But at the center of all of my work has been about the fact that we're facing all of this change and we need to walk with community through that process. And we need to move from a place of fear and anxiety into a place of figuring out what it is that we love and want to protect as we change, and we change fast. And that takes a very different kind of approach on the ground. And so we need to have a lot of patience for folks, but we also need to be really clear about where we're going. And, this election came up, like I ran last time, and I was looking at this one going, holy crow, it's a really, really tough budget. We need to move on energy transition very, very quickly. This is going to be hard, but we absolutely need to prioritize where we're putting our resources
Sure.
into our most pressing issues.
We have
time.
Sorry.
Yep.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to move on to Harun to share, something about what he thinks the council could do better in terms of inclusion. Harun, please unmute yourself.
Of course, I'm muted. Welcome to Zoom. Well, StreamYard. But when it comes to inclusion, I think the best thing we can do is give people a seat at the table. Edmonton's been a city for over 126 years. We haven't elected a single Black city councilor. We haven't elected a single woman of color to city council. The best thing, if we're talking about inclusion here, the best thing that we can do is give communities a seat at the table because they deserve it. They deserve to have their voice there. Edmonton is facing some serious systemic issues, and the best way we can solve these issues is by having people from multiple different backgrounds that are diverse on city council. We need more gender parity on city council. We need more race parity on city council. And if you want to be inclusive, that's the best way that we can be. The next thing I think we also need to do is that we need to work on our, in a sense, we need to include more people when it comes to community engagement. That is the number one thing I'm hearing at the doors. When we're talking, and as Kirsten mentioned, when people are talking about infill is an idea that's very misunderstood. And we need to work with community members to explain it because, as she perfectly put it, we need to walk with the community through this change. We need to make sure that communities can actually feel like we're not shoving it down their throat, but we're actually partnering with them to make these changes so that this city can be viable for my generation and for their kids. Because that's exactly what we're trying to do here. We're trying to make sure that Edmonton is an economically viable city because we've sprawled out too far. But once again, the best thing we can do for inclusivity is ensuring that we're including community leagues when we're discussing infill projects. We're including community leagues when we're talking essentially just include communities. That is the gist of it. And it's something that City Council has done so poor at. And it's such a basic thing that it confuses me.
Thanks, Harun. I will move. I'm sorry, my mic was muted. So, Susan, I would like to extend a little bit of that question to you. So the question is, we see a disproportionate amount of Black and Indigenous people among the homeless and, among the people who are incarcerated. So is there any way that the council can change that?
Okay, so the question is about inclusivity on council with Indigenous people. I'm sorry, it kind of broke up there a bit, Mary. Is that what the question is?
Okay, I'm going to repeat it.
Thank you.
So there is a disproportionate number of Black and Indigenous communities in homeless populations, as well as ones that are struggling with addictions, as well as ones that are struggling with, homelessness and other issues, social issues. So how are you going to change that as a counselor?
Well, so first and foremost, our Indigenous community needs to be engaged and not just given sort of lip service. Telling our Indigenous or Black communities what we're going to do for them is much less important than sitting them down and asking them what they want us to do for them. So, for example, we can come up with lots and lots of ideas, but if we don't sit down with them and engage with them, it's pointless. I've been a post-incarceration employer. I have employed many people that have addictions in our industry. There's only two kinds of addicts. There's practicing and recovering, and both of them need our support and our guidance. Council needs to engage employers to help those communities, to help them manage the Indigenous and the all of our underserviced and populations. And I think that just giving, a nice little treaty statement is not good enough. Sitting down the communities and saying, we hire students constantly in the summer as interns. What kind of internships would be beneficial to your communities, and take immediate action on it? We have to quit just saying we're going to do things. We need to do something now. And instead of us coming up with ideas, us as in the people that have already experienced success, let's talk to the communities that are being discriminated against, that are having lack of success, that can't get through those ceilings and doors. Let's ask them what they need from us to move forward. That's what real engagement is about, in my opinion, and I think we can do it. Thank you.
Wow, Susan, I really loved your answer. Thank you so much. We really need some quick action on some of those things, for sure. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission had so many recommendations, out of which I don't know even if 2 of them have been applied. So we're still waiting. Byron, I'm going to ask you a question about climate change and how Edmonton Council is working on it. Do you think what they're doing is good? And if not, why? And what can you do?
There we go. Sorry, wasn't unmuting. So yeah, I do think that the first big step, and I really appreciate it, was Council declaring a climate emergency. I know that sometimes people look at these things as just lip service. It's not. It's important that we take that first step. And if you look at the city plan, there's a lot in there that's very important on how we can move forward and address the climate emergency. The new waste rollout, it's a long overdue step, but that's one thing that needed to be done years ago. And I guess, I don't know if we're going to touch on public infrastructure, but we could get into the issues with the composter there, because that's a big one as well. But ultimately, I think that there is a lot of good work, but we need to be careful that what we're doing is actually helping. We can go ahead and make Edmonton net zero carbon emissions when all we're doing is actually just putting the weight onto another part of the world. The hard part about the climate emergency, is it's a global issue. And so acting locally without thinking globally is not going to help anything. There is some great work on trying to increase people using active transportation with our bike networks. Of course, I also see that there is a little bit of a disconnect between the actions and what they're saying they want to do. You can build this nice bike network, but if it's not easy to get around and navigate, if it's not connected completely, and if construction just blocks the way, and people don't feel safe, they're gonna not bike instead of take their car to work. And I think that's a huge thing. We do have a lot of people that are cycling. The bike network has been beneficial, but it can be better. And we need to start approaching road construction and treating cars the same way as we treat bikes. And if we have to reroute traffic, the vehicles, and we have to reroute the bikes and actually think about that, and include bike parking across the country or across the city. Those are little things there. I think we also have the opportunity to really utilize the amount of money that we spend. Our procurement policy is a little bit vague on environmental issues, and I think that we can really take that and utilize that and make it so the green premium is reduced. I mean, we all know that it's more expensive to produce, say, green concrete, and so the city might just buy it because it's cheaper. They buy the less green concrete, but we should really take advantage of that. I mean, if we're going to make impactful change, we should use our huge amounts that we're spending and actually, bring change. And I think that there's also a lot of work to be done on retrofitting houses. There's a little bit of a gap between what the city's offering in grants, the city and the federal government in grants, and what can be afforded by a lot of low-income individuals that are just hanging on to a mortgage. They can't take on the extra cash needed to upfront pay for these retrofits. So we can look at ways to provide secured loans that are maybe paid back through property taxes, and they're able to pay it back with the energy efficiencies that they receive. So there's a lot of work to be done, and I think even in public transit, similar issues, we say that we want more transit ridership, but then we cut routes and make it harder for people to actually use transit. These little things that we need to actually start matching our actions with the vision that we have.
Thank you. Thanks, Byron. Moving on to Kirsten. The question I have is regarding the homelessness that we are seeing and the opioid crisis. The addictions in Edmonton has risen so much with the pandemic. How does the city deal with it? Because it's really not doing such a great job.
So, I mean, what's challenging with both of those issues is that in a lot of the tools to actually address them aren't jurisdictionally at the municipal level. And so, I mean, the city's sort of gone alone and done a lot of work on permanent supportive housing and has approved a number of permanent supportive housing projects that are supposed to build about 600 units this year, which is, a substantial change from what we were seeing for a long time, which was nothing. That being said, as I mentioned earlier, we're seeing an increase of about 200 people a month, unhoused in our city. And so, this is a crisis. And then when we layer in the opioid crisis, it's absolutely devastating. And so we need to do a couple different things. First of all, we need to be looking at how we're allocating those resources. So we are currently funding. So, I mean, the Safer for All report that came out after the discussions around policing in the city, I think is a very important place to start in terms of the concrete steps that we can take as a municipality to shift resources and start addressing some of these needs with appropriate services instead of with ones that are often not necessarily helpful and sometimes really harmful. We are currently funding police by population. It's the only part of our city that we fund based on a population increase. And so it's been kind of getting a substantial increase in its budget over many years where almost nothing else does. And that needs to shift. Reach is doing excellent work in this space. But the other place that I'm seeing some real challenges is we have all of these amazing grassroots organizations like Bear Clank Patrol, 36 Outreach. There's a new one that's just come up that's focusing specifically on the opioid crisis and trying to make things a little safer for folks. And we're not prioritizing those groups in terms of how we're coordinating our actions. We're not going to them first and saying, how can we help you? And the people on the ground are the ones who understand the issues the best. So we need to ramp up our investment in permanent supportive housing. We need to keep pushing on that. We need to really prioritize the grassroots organizations and the frontline work that's being done already by organizations like REACH. We need to implement Safer for All, and and then we also have to try to work with the other levels of government. One of the issues with our unhoused population is that we are the northern center for all of northwestern Canada. So if people need a hospital, or if they're involved in the criminal justice system, from northern BC, northern Saskatchewan, northern Alberta, and the territories, they often come to Edmonton, but they don't know Edmonton, and they don't know where they access resources in Edmonton, and they get released from prison, or they get released from hospital, or they were here to be with somebody in hospital, or someone dealing with the criminal justice system, and then they're done all of that, and they don't know what to do next, and they're dropped off downtown, and there's often a massive gap in terms of connecting them back to the communities where they have homes and support and community. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done coordinating with other levels of government and those different systems to help people who have a place to go, be able to go back to their communities because they want to. And that's a big piece of why we're seeing such massive increases in Edmonton. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Moving on to Harun, I have a question about infrastructure. Do you think that the city could do better in terms of public infrastructure? Harun, please unmute yourself.
Second time. But no, when it comes to public infrastructure, I think the city can always do better. There's always room to do better. But something I've been hearing from folks around the city is that we really need to do better when it comes to more public parks. We need to do better when it comes to access to these public parks. We also need to do better when it comes to sidewalks, because a lot of sidewalks, especially, I know Garneau right now is going under neighborhood revitalization, which is phenomenal, because I know the community over there has been begging for one for a while. But we really need to make sure the road, the sidewalk, it deteriorated so badly that people, it wasn't a safe environment for a lot of families. It wasn't a safe environment for people who had to use wheelchairs. We need to make sure that neighborhoods do not get that bad. We need to make sure that we need to have somewhat of a standard. So something I'm actually advocating for is I want to propose neighborhood audits. So we want to make sure that we're auditing neighborhoods frequently to make sure that sidewalks and roads are usable. Because we want to make sure that everywhere around the city is accessible by wheelchair, because no one should have to struggle in the city. I also think too that when it comes to public parks, we need to make sure that infrastructure there is maintained well. For me, growing up, I love parks. I love going to playgrounds. I loved hanging out there. It's a beautiful place for community to come together, and we need to make sure that they're maintained well. Like communities like Belgravia, communities like Greenfield, they are very fortunate to have really nice parks and playgrounds. But we know lots of other communities around the city don't have access to that. And we definitely need to work on that.
Thanks, Harun. That was amazing. So when you say audit, I hope you're not saying council audits.
Oh, no. No, that would be... that would be 13 people running around the city. That would not be efficient. But for me, if a community member ever sends me an email about it, I will definitely pass it on to folks in the community neighborhood standards departments.
Thank you so much. That was really good. You've thought about this. I like it. All right. Now the question for Susan would be one on safety and crime. I know the regions that you cover, they are not like really bad, like, our downtown areas, but still there is crime. So how do you think, especially minority communities and other people would feel safe and feel that they belong to the communities that they reside in?
So it's interesting that you perceive that, say, my home community of Aspen Gardens doesn't have very much crime. However, in 2008, there was a serial rapist that victimized an elderly woman in Aspen Gardens. It was a horrific crime. Our neighborhood had a huge problem with people wanting to become vigilantes and arming themselves and doing nighttime guarding of the neighborhood and patrols of the neighborhood. So with that in mind, I sat down with...
I'm sorry, I guess ignorance is bliss.
Oh, no. This was a perfect question for me. I'm happy on this one, Mary. This is my question. So at that point in time, I sat down and I developed a crime prevention and community connection program that can be rolled out in any community in the city, virtually free of charge, and we can utilize the existing Edmonton Federation of Community Leagues to do it. The EFCL is a very unique organization. The city of Calgary does not have our community league network that we have here. So the crime prevention program is part of that, and it allows neighbors to get to know each other quite well, and it reduces crime through preventive measures. It's been extremely successful to the point that now, Mary, people like you are saying, oh, you don't have very many crimes in your neighborhood. You're right, we don't. We've worked really hard at it for 13 years, and I'm super stoked about that. Now, when it comes to inclusion, that's the community connection program. That's part of being neighborly. We want to have that inclusion by getting our community leagues and our neighbors knowing each other. So in our neighborhood, when somebody moves in, the 8 neighbors around them immediately introduce themselves, get to know them. It doesn't matter what your nationality is, what your race or culture is. We want you to feel as if you're part of this neighborhood. And then we have block parties that make it inclusive. Many cultures bring food and people. One of the issues we find is that, say, the community leagues have events, but they work on a North American calendar of celebrations. Well, lots of cultures don't have a North American calendar, so we need to have them feel more inclusive. So a strong crime prevention and community connection program will reduce the crime and make people feel more included. The number of different cultures in our community now, as opposed to 80 years ago, the fabric has changed so much, and it's absolutely lovely, and it benefits everybody to promote it all.
Awesome. Wow, that was a superb answer. You educated me quite a bit about your community.
I feel badly now. I feel badly now because I wasn't attacking you. I wanted to say we reduced crime in our neighborhood, and I am so happy about it.
Thank you so much. You guys are doing some good work there for sure. Byron, the question I have for you is about innovation and technology and how Edmonton being such a leader in that area, with being a leader in robotics and electronics and all of these areas. And so how do you think it will help economic recovery post the pandemic?
Well, I think that the tech sector and innovation is a huge part of our long-term recovery out of this. I think that the economic recovery is kind of in 2 steps. There's the short term, really getting out of COVID, because we don't even know the full impact just yet. There's still going to be many businesses that go under, and we're heading into a 4th wave. I think that it's getting harder and harder to argue against that. So I hope that our strong businesses survive, but it's going to be very difficult. You already see it down White Ave, how difficult it is. So that's a different question, and we'll focus on what you're actually asking about when it comes to the long-term diversification of our economy. It's starting to be no longer a debate. Do we need to diversify? I think if you ignore that we do, you're still just fooling yourself. And lucky for us, we have great institutions that have produced some brilliant people, some great entrepreneurs. I think of, I got some friends that started Future Fields, which is growing lab meat, and they're doing a huge job, and they're getting worldwide attention. The tech sector is huge, but what we really need to do as council and as a city is ensure that we're, one, strengthening our relationships with our great institutions that are here and fostering that, and we can help bring those entrepreneurs to the forefront and display them to the world and ensure that they get the help they need. but also that the help that we're giving doesn't kind of put them at risk of they would do better somewhere else or they're going to leave. Furthermore, I think that building a city that's livable, we're going to hear it throughout the whole campaign about 15-minute communities. Inclusion comes in here. We need to build a city that people want to come to. So we need to keep the talent that's here, but we also need to attract the talent, because you look at big tech companies, say like Amazon, they wouldn't have even thought to put a head office here, because we're not the kind of city that the talent that they're looking for wants to be in, which is unfortunate because we have a great river valley system. We have all the makings of a very livable city for everyone, but we just need to ensure that we actually have the services for that. We're a city that you can get around easily, and we have great nightlife. You go to places like, I'm going to think like Austin, Texas. You go down the street there and every place has music going. I know nightlife doesn't really necessarily come to the forefront of everyone's importance, but it is important if we want to make this city the place that attracts talent. So it's kind of two-step. We need to ensure that we're doing everything to support the talent that is here, and we're attracting the talent to come here so that that talent that's homegrown can stay here and make this their head office.
Thank you so much, Byron. Kirsten, we see that our communities are aging, and Byron was sharing about how we need to attract talent. Most of the talent is pretty young. What do you think about the aging communities in Edmonton? Are we doing enough? And if not, how can the council support them better?
So, I mean, we're a very young city in a young province in terms of our overall average age. We're much younger than most of the rest of the country. But that being said, we still, we are seeing that bubble of the baby boom, and especially during the pandemic, we saw just how stark it was for a lot of folks who are either just very isolated or they're in some kind of extended care or home where suddenly COVID's running rampant, and it's really devastating. So one of the big issues I think we have as a city is that a lot of our city was built during boom times, and a lot of our city is suburban. So even our core mature neighborhoods still have a very suburban model of development. And what this means is that we've created a lot of single generation communities and single generation amenities. And what we've been doing is just leapfrogging out. And so, 4 years ago, 50% of the kindergartners in our city were living and going to school outside the Henday. So if we want our neighborhoods to be thriving, we need to make sure that we have a lot of different types of households. Another thing I heard last election and this election, and certainly something that's close to my heart because my mom and dad are of this age, is that, folks living in often they were the people who built the home, or they bought it only 5 or 10 years after it was built. And now they're aging and they want to downsize, but they want to stay in their community. And there aren't a lot of options in a lot of these neighborhoods for where they can go. That's improving. It is getting better. But, whether it's even just like a condo down the block or just something that's smaller or a garage suite, that sort of thing, there's a lot of different ways that you can downsize. But I met a lot of seniors who were feeling like they had too much house, but that there was nowhere for them to go where they could stay in the community, where they had their friends, where they knew their neighbors, where they had the amenities that they appreciated. So we need to be thinking much more multi-generationally and more multi-use in terms of the kinds of development that we're doing. And my mom is in the process of working with a lot of other folks to build co-housing, and they're in the process of putting their second story on. It's a net zero ready build, 26 units, multi-generational. So there's families with young kids, there's single folks, there's people with disabilities, and there's seniors. And, it's extremely difficult to build this kind of a building in our city. The barriers to really creative development are significant. But it's also a vision for the future in terms of And there's lots of different ways that we can build these multi-generational communities, which allow people to age in place. So but that would be the big piece is we kind of have to do that neighborhood retrofitting that's related to the 15-minute city, but that makes sure that we have the housing diversity we need to allow people to age in their communities.
Thank you. That was a really comprehensive answer. There is a lot of older people from different diverse backgrounds as well who don't even speak the language. Like they don't know English. And so I know of elder Filipino people and Punjabi people who speak only Punjabi. And there is just so much of that here. And there is a lot of food insecurity too. And so many of them were really stuck at home with the pandemic, not able to go anywhere. They really struggle, especially the seniors. And so that's why I wanted to kind of address this question. Moving on to Harun, is there something we can do better as a council in terms of negotiating with different levels of government so that, the city gets a better deal?
It didn't catch me this time. I got on. But I think right now we're dealing with a provincial government that is increasingly unwilling to do their job. Their mandate here is to make sure that Albertans feel safe in their communities, and at this current moment, they don't. I've been talking to so many people from across the board. We've been talking about safe injection sites, supportive housing, and how the city of Edmonton has taken on a large part of these responsibilities, and it's not our responsibility. I think in this circumstance, it's an ethical question. Where do we fund these things knowing that we're taking on an extra burden, or do we not? And I think the answer is we have to. We have to make sure that community members feel safe in this city, and we need to work with the federal government now. The federal government right now, they're heading into election season. There's lots of opportunities for us to partner with the brand new government, whoever does get elected, and we need to work with them. We also need to hold the UCP government accountable for their actions, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that got elected, and they're the ones that formed government. We need to partner with them we need to hold them accountable as much as possible. When it comes to major funding decisions, we need to work with them. We need to pick the province first, because the city right now, we're struggling financially, but that doesn't mean that we have to stop funding social investments, social issues, because they are important. We need to make sure that community is the foundation of a house, and business builds on that. But without a good foundation, it crumbles. So we need to make sure that we're investing in social issues. We need to make sure that Edmonton is actually solving homelessness. We also need to make sure that our unhoused neighbors do not feel unsafe. We need to make sure that everyone in the city feels safe. And the best way possible we can do that is by investing in organizations that are actually putting the groundwork. Right now, as we speak, there's an organization going around downtown Edmonton called the Water Warriors. They hand out water, they hand out shoes, they hand out clothing. We need to invest in these things. We need the city council. I was shocked myself when I went to them and I did some crowd fundraising, talked to some folks on Twitter, got some money, and I went to go donate some resources to them. I was shocked to learn that the city of Edmonton hasn't even reached out to them. The city council for the downtown area is Scott McKean right now. I was incredibly shocked that he hadn't reached out, talked to them, seeing what city council could work on here and there, handing out water, because right now, I know we're heading into another heat wave. They're struggling with water. So that's a big thing too, where we need to make sure that organizations are actually putting in the groundwork aren't struggling. And we're making it easier for these organizations to deliver key services to key communities around the city.
Thank you, Harun. Susan, what does meaningful engagement with your ward mean to you? And how will you achieve that better than what the council is doing right now? Because I don't think traditional methods are working.
Meaningful engagement with
your constituents.
Okay. So I know from door knocking that this is a major concern. Our constituents feel like there are community engagement sessions that are set up and they have a predetermined outcome. From door knocking, I would have to agree with them that many of the neighborhood renewal projects had a predetermined outcome, and the citizens within that neighborhood didn't feel like anybody was listening to them. If we're going to have engagement, it needs to be authentic. It needs to be meaningful, and it needs to be relative to what they're doing, right? So the citizens in our ward deserve to have a meaningful engagement on any of the projects they have. We can develop a community connection app or a community engagement app. If we can develop a waste app, we can develop one that allows neighbors to find out what's going on in their neighborhood, to have input into projects, have input into zoning. This one size fits all has not worked for any part of Papastew. And this idea that densification is putting in a couple of split lots and that's affordable housing. We all know it's not affordable housing. We all know it's not densification. And all it's doing is pitting neighbors against neighbors. It's a pathetic excuse. And so we're going to have to start listening to the neighbors by engaging them and hearing what they're saying. You do realize that citizens are the bosses of the council. The council is not the boss of the citizens. It's the other way around. We report to the citizens and they give us our mandate, they give us our marching orders, and we need to listen to them. I'm finding that when I'm out in the community, it's amazing how they just don't think any of the housing options actually are even relevant to the neighbors. Sixplexes where there's no transit corridor and no groceries, that's not going to help anybody. Split lots that take a $450,000 beautiful house away from young people's ability to buy a house, and we put in a couple of $1.2, $1.3 million houses. My children are quite successful, and they're not that successful. That's not densification. That's not affordable housing. I am listening to what our constituents are telling me at the door, and I will keep listening if I'm elected.
Thank you so much, Susan. That was perfect. Byron, we've seen property taxes go up by leaps and bounds, and some people with, the unemployment and the situations that we're in are not able to match up or keep up with these raises. As a city councillor, what would you do to change that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very difficult question and it's a very important one. Any of us that are paying property taxes, even if you're renting, you're paying property taxes in the end. We need to be cognizant that any change in the municipal burden, and so that's property taxes plus also what we're paying for waste and power and water, that really needs to be kept in check, especially as we come out of this COVID recovery. We're coming out of a recession. A lot of people are losing jobs, and I know that there's a labor shortage right now, but that doesn't mean that we're out of this and everyone's gotten good work. It means that we still have a lot of work to do, and I think that what council needs to do at this point is make a promise that we're going to have 0% tax increases for at least the next couple of years. I think the big thing that we're already seeing council doing, and it's a huge step that should have happened a long time ago, is priority-based budgeting. It's silly that it took this long, but it's needed. We need to actually start listening to the city auditor, and it right in there in the city audit report, it says we do have a spending problem, and the problem comes from a lot of places. And I think that we also need to be careful, because if we start cutting capital projects, we're just going to be leaving future generations with an infrastructure deficit. It's essentially robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? So we need to be careful that we're upkeeping the infrastructure. We don't want to go back to the days of, I think of Bill Smith. I was still kind of young, but I understand that there was a big gap in what was actually getting done back then. So we need to make sure we're building, but we need to be responsible. We need to look at administration. There's a huge glut from what I'm hearing from people that have both worked in administration, have done consulting with the city, and everyone around. It seems to be talking about the problem with middle management. We got managers managing managers. They've got these huge salaries that have just grown throughout the years, and then they have all this time off. So they aren't working as much because they're off, and you have another high paid manager managing that workload. And it's not the people that are doing the work. It's these middle managers that I think we need to focus on. You look at the difference between the full-time employees of Calgary and full-time employees of Edmonton, and there's right there gives you some evidence that something needs to be changed. And then on top of that, there's accountability within the management and in administration. I mean, it was only a couple of years ago where we got this big, huge scandal that there's harassment in the workplace. There can't be harassment in the workplace if you have good management. And these people that are doing the harassment, they're still got their jobs and they're still getting pay increases. There's some failure right there in accountability, and we really need to take a close look. And it's not to say that everyone in administration is a glut. These are good paying jobs. We need good paying jobs in the economy, but we also need to make sure that we're spending appropriately, because it's the responsibility. We're taking tax dollars and utilizing it, and we need to make the most of it. And like I said before, we can't cut from capital projects necessarily because we're just doing the same thing that way. So I think to answer your question straightforward, we need to ensure that any tax increases are minimal at best, but I think that we should be promising 0% for at least the next couple of years.
Thank you. That would be a welcome change. Kirsten, just following a little bit up on what Byron just spoke, and I am totally in congruence with what he was saying because I've seen it. I was, in fact, part of the anti-racism fight that was going on with the city. So I am seriously interested to see how, as a counselor, you can help change the administration to be more inclusive and to be more fair with all its own employees, to show them, to show the city of Edmonton itself as a good workplace that everybody wants to work in and everybody has an opportunity, because people just keep applying, and even though they're super fitting for those roles, they never get called. So how can you change that?
So, I mean, I actually had a question not unlike this last election, and one of the things I have seen in the last 4 years is there has been a beginning of a shift. Some of senior management has changed. Not sure yet what's going to happen with the new city manager, but we do have one, and I have a little bit of experience working with Andre, so maybe. But there's also been changes in senior administration in terms of a number of the deputy city managers, and it is starting to get a little more diverse. Not a lot, but a little. That being said, the issue really is around how we support the leadership of others. And too often we see power and leadership as something that we kind of hoard. Like, we sort of find our little camp over here, and then we don't want to share. And the reality is that power grows when we share it, and our leadership doesn't suffer by giving other people an opportunity to lead. And so a big part of one of the things I want to do across the board is encourage anyone who's meeting with me, whether it's a stakeholder, a community group, or someone from internally in administration, to have them bring new leaders, younger leaders, more diverse leaders who they're working with into the conversations. When they want to meet with a counselor, they need to bring somebody along with them to learn and to grow, and for me to learn from, and for them to learn from, so that we start being really intentional about expanding that table and those experiences, because too often we're just not thinking about the mentorship of other leaders in our organization. So that's one piece of it. It's and I do think that mentorship piece is really important, and it needs to become one of the sort of pillars of how we look at administration and our human resources in terms of in that lens of inclusion. it's not just about being nice and having more people there. Fundamentally, we all experience the world differently. We all experience it in our bodies and in our minds in our different ways. And when we build a city with a very narrow set of perspectives, not on purpose and not badly and not with negative intention, we make a lot more mistakes. And so, one of the other things I want to do is I have a policy piece for community around this, but also internally create a space where city folks can come who have innovative ideas about how to make the organization work better or how to try something new or different kinds of project, because too often those great ideas get stuck somewhere because it's a very risk-averse culture. And so having a space where it's like, this is where we go to try new things and to experiment, and that we're going to take the risks in this space, and that we provide that opportunity not only to citizens and to businesses and to innovators and arts organizations and entrepreneurs, but also to the folks who are working in our administration, because there's a lot of talent and a lot of vision there.
Thank you, Kirsten. You
So,
really
yes.
exceeded your time. Sorry about that, but I love your passion. Thank you so
keep me
much.
on track. I appreciate it.
So I'm going to actually pose the last question to Harun, because we have very little time left. I'm, first of all, very grateful to each of you. You bring so many different perspectives to the table. I loved talking to each of you. Harun, since you have done such a great job of researching what's happening in your community and getting your ears to the ground, I just want to know, how well prepared are you for success or failure?
That is quite an interesting question. For me personally, if I do, let's start with the best outcome. If I do succeed, I think I'm well prepared to become the next city council for Papastew. I think some of the things that I'm going to be working with me and my team on is really ensuring that everyone feels safe in the city. That's going to be the first main focus for me. I'm going to be partnering with the city councils, especially in the one for whoever gets elected in Ward or Damon as its neighboring ward. And we have a lot of the issues that their ward's facing, our ward is facing too. So I'll definitely partner with them. And if I do unfortunately not win this time, I will not retire into the abyss, but I will be back eventually. I think this is a really great learning opportunity for myself. I am 18. I've been able to run a campaign that's managed to get over 400 donors to the campaign. We have been knocking on thousands of doors, and whatever does happen, I am well prepared.
Wow, you're an incredible young man. Hats off to you. Thank you so much to each and every candidate. Each of you have done such an amazing job researching and really finding out what's the best way to, and really creatively dealing with different things. And I do believe that Edmonton has a superb vehicle for community engagement. That is the community leagues, and each of you have mentioned it. I'm so grateful to you for recognizing that. It's our big strength, which is underutilized, and I hope that when you get elected to council, you will do the right things. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mary. This was an awesome experience. I wish all my competitors the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was great. Lovely to see you all.
Yep. I look forward to the next one.
Yeah.
Take care, everyone.
Take care.
Thank
All
you.
the best.